Tonight we have gathered some gentlemen who are riding the fastest horses on the internet, in business, and in the fight for freedom of expression. Gentlemen, good evening and congratulations. We are delighted to host you from Silicon Valley. John Matze, CEO of Parler, is a computer scientist and an iOS development expert. He's an experienced software consultant who developed and managed mobile applications and products for startup companies around the United States. John brings his significant technical background to his current business venture and is truly rocking the world of social media as membership soars on his platform today. Jeffrey Wernick, COO of Parler, is an angel investor and lecturer at the University of Chicago. Jeffrey plays to win and has done so with his early investments in Bitcoin, Airbnb, and Uber. It is not his love for being in the spotlight that attracts him to social media, but his passion for free speech. This time, he has placed his bet on Parler. Chris Pavlovski, entrepreneur, has achieved huge success with ventures in North America, Europe, and Asia. Most recently, as the CEO and founder of Rumble.com, he led the free speech-friendly video platform company to jump past TikTok this week in the Google Play Store. Chris's response up to that was, quote, "I am humbled. A new internet is emerging." By the way, Parler was #1 on trending when I last checked a couple of hours ago. So I've invited each of the guests to make some opening remarks about themselves and their motivation to be involved in these platforms. After they do that, I will ask them a few questions, and we'll get a little dialogue going here, and then we will absolutely save time for your questions at the end. So with that, Chris, would you like to get us started?
Sure thing. Well, first, I want to say thank you to the Liberty Forum for hosting this event, and Jane for moderating this panel. I'm looking forward to some great discussion today. I think the timing of this is incredible. So who knows? I don't know how you planned for it, but it worked out quite well. So I'll give a little brief history on myself. I actually started on the internet since I was about 16 years old, and I was that stereotypical entrepreneur building websites and curating video content for the masses out of my parents' basement. I'm 37 now, so I guess I could say that I've been an entrepreneur for more than half of my life and my entire working career. When I first started on the internet back in the early 2000s, the market I was most interested in was video. I've been in video since then. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm still in video, so I haven't left it. I've been in it the whole time, and going to continue to do so for the next foreseeable future, clearly. Over the last 20 years, I'd say that there's been one major pivotal moment in the video space, and that was in 2006. Prior to 2006, there was tons of websites like College Humor, Dailymotion, eBaum's World, Break.com. It was an incredibly exciting time with thousands and thousands of websites that were emerging, including YouTube itself. By 2006, there was that major pivotal moment in video, and it was when Google acquired YouTube. I think it was late 2006 in November, if I remember correctly. And that is when the internet changed forever, particularly in video. It changed forever, and that happened in about 2007 and 2008. Basically, all the traffic, all the distribution and volume got sucked up by YouTube. And from that very moment, YouTube became the go-to destination for anything video. At this point, I had to step back, pull myself out of the market, and think about how I'm going to get back in. YouTube and Google completely monopolized the entire video space. And I wanted to get back in. I had to figure out a way. All their competition kind of went to the side, and barely anybody exists now. So it wasn't until 2013 where I uncovered two major deficiencies in YouTube's platform. And this is when I launched Rumble. So in late 2013, I would say it was October, early November. And importantly, both these deficiencies surrounded the little creators like myself, everybody that's on this, that's watching this today, the masses, the little creator. And the first major gap that I was able to identify, well, the two gaps that I was able to identify, one was copyrights and two was distributions. When it came to copyright, what I noticed is that there was a lot of content being used and being stolen across various different platforms. Think of it this way: Facebook, Snapchat, every single platform is using our content, making billions of dollars on our content, and they're reaping the profits of that. Nobody else is. It's not being kicked back to the creators that are creating this content. Imagine every single thing on Facebook and on Snapchat is created by you, and they're making billions and you're making nothing. So that was the first thing. I thought that giving a good rights management platform to the copyrights, where the distribution and revenue goes, the revenue particularly goes back to the creators that created that content, is really important. So monetization is a really key piece to Rumble, and that surrounds the copyright. The second point, and it ties right into what's happening today, is the distribution. So if you go back circa 2007, what did you see on the front page of YouTube? You saw Charlie Bit My Finger videos, you saw home videos, you saw viral videos, you saw tons of this content on YouTube. By 2013, when I started Rumble, this content was not there anymore. It was all authoritative companies, large brands. It was the people's content was basically gone. Like, it was there, but it was not discoverable anymore. It was not something they promoted. They promoted authoritative names and brands over Charlie Bit My Finger. So that was the second major gap that I saw in the distribution. And then if you fast forward till today, you're in a world now, and I guess, the political environment has actually surfaced what's been happening to the small creator. The small creator lost their distribution, and now as politicians lose their distribution, there's a lot more noise and a lot more attention on it. And that brings us to 2020, and we're in a scenario where things, from 2007 to 2013 were bad for the little creator, and now 2013 to 2020 have gotten bad even for the large creators. Unless you're an authoritative brand that Google likes, you're not going to get the distribution that you want. Same with Facebook, same with any platform out there. So that's what Rumble was built on. It was built on the foundations of those two major things. One is bringing the monetization and generating the value you deserve around your content. And two is making sure that the little creator is always going to get their fair distribution and their fair voice on our platform, and not leave them behind like all these other platforms have done. That's my introduction for Rumble.
That's terrific. And we welcome you, Chris, and we're so glad to hear that. I want to inject a quote here from JFK that I think applies a little bit to your opening statement. JFK said, "We are not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is afraid of its people." And you're describing what needs and has to be an open market that you've joined. So welcome. John, want to step up and
Sure.
say hello?
Sounds good. Yes, my name is John Matze. I'm the founder of Parler. We are a free speech social media platform. Probably in the last couple of days, we're becoming a little bit more popular. We've been very popular all year, but in the last couple of days, we've been particularly popular because we've held the #1 place on the App Store for now 48 hours. It's been a very fun ride. Basically, we're focused heavily on privacy, users' rights, and free speech. And so the idea is that you own your data and you own your own voice. And that's really the genuine concept behind Parler. And over the last 48 hours, we've seen so many users that at times, because I've actually been monitoring the questions as we've been doing these intros. So I was going to answer a couple of them kind of as we go through. At times, it has gotten a little bit laggy over this weekend, and that's due to just the tremendous growth. We saw us go from 500,000 daily active users to now over 4 million. I think even today we're even higher than that. I haven't even checked today. I saw a press release we did said 4.5 million or even higher. So the today has been crazy. By the end of this week, we're going to have well over 10 million active users on the platform, which puts us, as a major competitor to Twitter. And so, and Facebook, both Twitter and Facebook. We are one of the only companies that are able to contest that market. And this is awesome news because that means the free market is working. And so that didn't come without some hiccups. Of course, we've had some slowdowns in the last couple of days, but we've powered through, and today's been very smooth for the most part, and things are going great. And so this is really awesome news for both capitalism, free markets, and free speech online. And so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you guys for the invite.
Thank you, John. We're really, really glad you're here, and congratulations. That's so exciting. I want to share with you that a text I got earlier today. Some of your new members who you might not be expecting. I got a message from somebody who knows a lot about Midwestern farming, and he said, FYI, a lot of ag and financial traders on Twitter are saying they're going to Parler. So there's some good companies.
It's great. I've had people that everybody has actually, including my neighbors, have come up to me saying, wow, I've been seeing you guys on the news. It's awesome what you guys are doing. And so I'm seeing people all over now recognizing this as a home brand, which is excellent news. I think this is really good because we're finally taking speech back for the people, addressing these problems, especially problems that you might have seen in the Social Dilemma movie. I don't know if you've watched it. But I found it very fascinating. I didn't like their conclusions in the movie because the conclusions were very big government-esque, which kind of puts me off. But they did address a lot of issues: content curation by the platform, rearranging feeds, manipulating people with their advertising. And so we're really trying to make social media a humane and real thing again for the people and not for these kind of tech oligarchs.
Great. Well, Jeffrey, we want to invite you to join in on next.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Wernick. Thank you for having me here. I'm really just someone who wrote a small check to Parler and trying to help it grow because I have a strong conviction with respect to the mission. I'm a free speech absolutist, and I'm somebody who wants to live in a world of a sovereign individual in a censorship-resistant society where people can preserve the type of anonymity to the extent that we had at the point in time when the nation was founded. If we think about the debate when the founders were moving from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, many people don't recall that actually selling the Constitution was a very difficult sale. There were the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. There was a debate on whether we should even have an executive branch and whether there should be a president. We designed a system that was tried to be where we can organize ourselves, but in a decentralized fashion, where there was a system of significant amount of checks and balances embedded in the system. Local government, federal government, state government, legislative branches, judicial branches, constantly basically in conflict with each other. And we got consensus through the resolution of that conflict in a system where no one authority was above any other authority, and it was meant to be a check. And we had the Bill of Rights is basically a check on government, a government with respect to us, it's not a check on us. So the way, when it was previously mentioned to, like my interest in Bitcoin, and some of my other investments, there's kind of a common theme. If you think about Uber, there's no real central authority within Uber, okay? Uber has a matching service. People who want to find a car are looking for people who want to have drive a car. They give you information about the driver. The driver is not an employee. The government is trying to convert them into employees. But basically what Uber is offering is basically an information intermediary. They're matching people who want to go from one place to another. They're giving you the information about the person who will pick you up. And they're the infrastructure that will take care of everything else. So Airbnb does essentially the same thing in real estate. The way I see it, like the big fork is between really, do we want to live in a world of really where we're enabling central authorities to become stronger, or are we decentralizing back where we have sovereign individuals again? And if you kind of think about like what Parler has been going through these last couple of days with some of the media reports, the way I like to frame it is very simple. Hopefully I'll say it in a simple way. You have a world out there that is saying that free speech, in allowing free speech, you're really enabling the flow of noise, because embedded in a lot of free speech, there's a lot of misinformation. And so the misinformation is damaging our ability at self-government, because people do not have the capacity to necessarily discern between, or do what's, what Fisher Black would have called signal extraction, of taking, all the noise and figuring out what the value is embedded in the noise. So what platforms like Facebook and Twitter are saying is, this is too overwhelming for any individual to do. So while content curation and content moderation, is not necessarily, we're trying to get better at it, but it's a necessary evil if we're going to continue to have a democratic society, because we have to come up with a better way of just filtering out as much noise as possible so we can have a pleasant conversation. The problem is who has the capacity of necessarily filter out the noise? Someone who used to filter out the noise, and I don't want to make this, a religious thing, but I think there was one person who used to be acting as a censor, and they basically did bad things to you if you challenged that the earth was not flat. There were a bunch of people that challenged you if you denied the earth as the center of the solar system. Most of the school people at Cambridge and Oxford University, when Einstein came up with his 1905 papers, they basically said he was a quack. He was this low-level patent clerk who just didn't know what he was talking about. He was incompetent. He barely knew math. He was probably half illiterate, and nobody should pay attention to it. And Einstein didn't get more credibility until about 15 years later, when Eddington proved one of the experiments, and then that legitimized Einstein. Prior to that, if Facebook and Twitter around today, and Einstein was living today and he wrote his 1905, you'd have a whole bunch of people saying we're the authority figure. You just don't know what you're talking about. Wright brothers, you can fly an airplane? Impossible. Nobody can fly an airplane. That's science fiction. You're a liar. You're a fake person. Okay? Fulton and the Steamboat was called Fulton's Follies. Thomas Edison, when he came out with the electricity, and then when he challenged Tesla, that basically when Tesla came out with the AC/DC, that Tesla was going to burn down the country. So these all people pretended to be authority figures, but what happens? The great innovators push through. The great innovators just don't accept it. They're strong individualists who sit back and exercise the rights that we are ordained in this country, and our inalienable rights, to pursue our own self-interest. And at doing so, we only pursue our self-interest if that interest benefits others. Because if it only benefits us, nobody will value it. So this is the greatest system in the world, that the only way you produce value for yourself is if you produce value for others through pure voluntary exchange. And so I don't want to live in a world where basically Mark Zuckerberg, becomes the official censor, that his Supreme Court basically supersedes our First Amendment. And that's the battle we're fighting now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I love it when we point out the morality of capitalism, because it certainly is such. Okay, so I want to talk about how to keep speech free and all of those details, but I can feel the audience breathing down my neck. I can feel the room. We got to just let me cut to the chase really quickly and acknowledge the elephant in the room, and that is the election. And I'd like to hear from each of you about how you think social media affected the election. I want to jump back to Chris. Chris, you're on mute.
Chris, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so going back to my introduction, censorship has been happening for a long time. It was happening to particularly the smaller creators, the smaller individuals back in, since like 2008 and forward. And it wasn't really noticed by the masses at all. It wasn't until this year, particularly in the last 2 years. 2018, I think, was a pivotal moment in terms of when censorship became kind of mainstream and started affecting politicians and people of, very high stature. and influencers. And then obviously it just got completely amplified during this election process to a point where even after the election and now it's like, you know, you have instances of certain leaders of countries not being censored, and you have the leader of the United States, the free world, being censored. And it's just in front of everybody now, and you can't ignore it. It's not just the little person anymore and the little guy that's been complaining since 2008. It's now the biggest guy on the planet that's complaining about it too. So in these large corporations, the big tech has all the strings, and they control that. So yeah, the election is a second pivotal moment in this. You know, I would say 2018 being a first presentation of this censorship on a large scale, and then a second presentation of this censorship on an even greater scale happening right now because of the election. And that's just put companies like Parler, Rumble, right into the spotlight for people that are looking for something that predates the censorship that you're seeing on these platforms right now.
Yeah. Dinesh D'Souza said just today, he said that, quote, digital censorship represents the worst threat to free speech in a century, certainly in peacetime. He called the tech giants quasi-private companies that turned once they got monopolistic power. So I want to get into censorship, and I want to come back to Jeffrey, because I know he would like to talk about government censorship versus free companies censoring people. But John, do you want to say something about the election?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with the election really quick. I think it goes hand in hand, and Jeffrey probably shares similar opinions, but I won't speak for him. But I will tee it up for him. So for the election, basically, I think it's proven that all of these fact checkers are just hot air. I think before this, everyone speculated that the fact checkers were biased and that they were kind of full of it. But now we all know, because the election has been pseudo-called for Biden. He has changed his bios on Twitter, on Facebook, made statements, made speeches saying he won. Only a week before, they censored Trump for saying, not censor, I don't like the term censor, because I think they have a right to allow people to speak or not speak on their platform. So I actually don't view this as censorship, because I view that Twitter and Facebook don't have an obligation to take anybody, and I can get to that later. But my point is, we've learned that the fact checkers are just really, they're completely biased. And this is because, we only saw a week ago when Trump was getting his stuff taken down for saying the exact same things Biden is saying, and the circumstances haven't changed. The election still has not been called. We don't know who the next president is going to be. Not one delegate from one state has even cast their electoral vote for the president, for the next president. The votes are changing rapidly, and there's lawsuits, and there's all sorts of investigations going on. So to claim via a fact checker that Biden is okay to announce victory and Trump isn't, is outrageous and completely false. And so the theme is, you cannot have fact checking without extreme bias, because it's their opinion that he's going to be the next president, and they're telling everybody it's fact. And to get onto the censorship bit before I hand it off to Jeffrey, I believe that what they're doing is not censorship. Facebook and Twitter are companies. They have rights to their own free speech. They provide a service. If they don't want to do business with you, they don't have to. And it's obvious that they can get away with it, because they've been in front of Congress and Senate multiple times testifying. And furthermore, it's clear that Facebook and Twitter aren't monopolies, because we are coming up to take them down. This is how the market works. We let them have their right. If they want to take people and ban them and mute them and change change kind of their version of world facts, then people are just going to leave and dump their service for somebody else who will be grateful to have this opportunity and take it and run with it and do a much better job. And so I'll hand it off to Jeffrey.
Okay, before we jump to Jeffrey, I wanted to get your take, John. You watched Zuckerberg and Sundar and Jack Dorsey testify in front of Congress. What was your impression of that? What was your reaction?
Well, my honest reaction is that I think it was just, I could say the TV, I could say the talking point one, or I could say my unfiltered view. And my unfiltered view is, I think it was just a way for a lot of politicians to get nice speeches that they could run during their next campaign season and play a nice video of them grilling these tech CEOs. It felt to me kind of like a communist witch hunt where the capitalist is the evil one every time. And they were coming at him for the most ridiculous things. Some of them just basic business practices. Some of them were bad too. But I didn't like the way the hearings went down. And I don't think that it accomplished too much. It did maybe put some fear into them, made them nervous. But I don't really think it's accomplishing a whole lot, in my opinion.
Okay. So Jeffrey, we've been scooching towards this whole First Amendment censorship piece here, and I know you want to talk about the difference between well, let me say it more directly, the Section 230 issue. So take it away.
Well, let's separate out the Section 230 from the concept of censorship.
Jeffrey, before you do that, I would like you to explain what that is to our audience, because I don't want everybody to assume that they know it, and it's important to distinguish these two things.
Okay, well, I'll get to that as I go through and tell my narrative. Okay. Right now, every business, when you go into any property, private property, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's arena, watching a football game, a baseball game, eating at your restaurant, going into somebody's house or anybody's business, everybody's business, they have rules. It's their property, and they get on their property to establish rules as long as those rules don't violate whatever discrimination laws that exist in the country. Free speech, they have no free speech First Amendment obligations. So Twitter, Facebook, they're all big companies, YouTube, okay, but they are private companies. They're private companies entitled to the rights that every other private company has. Whoever uses these companies with their services, they're acknowledging and accepting, their terms of service. And so they can't say, I accepted the terms of service. I understood that when you gave me access to this, I had to comply with these rules. I understand part of your rules are that you have the discretion to change them, and you don't need my consent to change them. The only way I consent is I keep using the platform or the company or the product. And if I don't continue to use it, it's because I don't agree with your rules and I'm not consenting to live by them. So I'm getting off and going to use something else. That's what's called competition. So the 230, if we think about when 230 was created, 230 was created in 1996. None of these companies really existed at that point in time. There were a whole bunch of people hosting things on the internet. At that point in time, there were no authority figures on the internet, and people were putting up content. And the point was, for the people who were hosting content, was to make sure that they would continue to encourage the hosting of content. They said, whatever content that's put up, you'll have immunity from, and you can't be litigated. You're not responsible for the content. The only thing we need you to do is when I tell you there's certain decency acts, and we are holding you responsible for making sure that certain things aren't put up. But outside of that, you're not going to be liable for anything, as long as basically all you're doing is preventing the type of indecency that we're describing as illegal, that you assume some responsibility associated with doing your best efforts to remove that. And as long as you do that and leave everything else alone, you don't have liability. So at that point, there was no conception that a company would come up, get into the business of basically saying, I'm going to capture your attention by offering you a free service. But really what I'm really doing is I'm collecting data. I'm analyzing you, and I'm monetizing all this information. So I'm getting your attention, and I'm monetizing all this data. So that business model was not contemplated in 1996 when this was written, because it didn't exist. So now all of a sudden we got these big companies out there that said, hey, we're going to build these nice, wonderful communities. People joined them because they were wonderful at the time. And then in 2016, something happened. A guy named Donald Trump became elected president. All these companies said, how could this happen? How can we live in a world, and I'm not saying this from a partisan point of view, because I'm a minarchist. So for me, I just want the government to leave me alone. So neither Republicans or Democrats will do a good job of leaving me alone. The Republicans will do a little better job of leaving me alone than Democrats. But I just really want to be left alone. And so then basically, a lot of these companies said, you know what, let's get into the content moderation curation business. And so the question is, there's a definition between what's a platform and mean you're distributing content versus creating content. What's the distinction between when you're actually a neutral platform as opposed to a publisher? A publisher doesn't get this type of immunity, a platform does. So if you're just hosting people, and you're hosting people and saying, in the spirit of, the 1996, thing with respect to Section 230, all I'm trying to do is in my neutral platform, keep it decent. So they give them, we have a business judgment rule that says as long as people are reasonably applying reasonable judgment, we're not going to go after to litigate them. As long as we think that they're providing reasonable judgment, we don't want to hold them liable for reasonable judgment. So Judge Thomas recently has ruled and said we have to be more careful about really distinguishing between a platform that's just distributing content and a platform that is now becoming an active part of the curation process, and at what point we think it's more of a publisher and a content creator than just a neutral platform. So that's a different debate. So it's a different debate on whether they have the right to remove content from whether they have the right while they're doing so to preserve legal immunity from it. So they're separate issues. It's not saying is they don't have the right to do it. They just say to what extent do they begin to moderate, curate, label, and do all the throttle and shadow ban. To what extent is all this algorithmic manipulation having them act in a way that's not really consistent with the principles embedded in 230, which again doesn't say what they're doing is illegal. What it says is, given to what they're doing, they no longer are subject to the immunity from lawsuits as they currently are. So those are two separate
Jeffrey,
issues.
Jeffrey, could you clarify for the audience what the benefits of that protection give them? Just really briefly, the 230 protection.
Let's think about it this way, okay? If right now, John pointed out, I'll give a different data point with respect to the election. And I'm going to simplify. What I'm going to say is not accurate, but from a technical point of view, but the point is still valid. If you go to predict it, okay, that's a prediction market, okay? So if you look at the value of, how much you have to pay for a Biden presidency and what the value of the Biden presidency versus Trump, you'll see almost every state has 99 cents. So basically you're saying almost all the states in the country, 44 states, it's basically people saying it's a fact that Biden. But there are 6 states currently where Biden is trading between 83 cents on the dollar and 89 cents on the dollar. 6 states. So the way I explain it this way, when someone says that's not material, okay, well, it's only 83 cents, it's still probable, whatever. One is 2 days ago, a bet on Trump winning was 12 cents, and today it's 15 cents. So that means that some people believe that there's credibility in the lawsuits, and that's the market pricing it. One thing is some individual having an opinion. The other is somebody with skin in the game who's betting money, who has done some analysis, more analysis than the individual down the street, who's making a monetary bet with real skin in the game. So I spoke to a journalist today and I said, let me place it this way. If I'm your money manager, okay, and you gave me money and I bought a bond at $100, okay? And you told me up the next day and said, how's that bond doing? And I said, well, the bond that you bought at $100, it's now worth 85 cents on the dollar. But don't worry, that 15% loss is not overnight, is not really material. How many of you believe that when you speak to people, if their net worth declined 15% overnight, would consider that non-material? Who? Do you know how many people would say 15% loss in net worth is really insignificant to me? It has no statistical significance whatsoever. So to the extent that it has significance and is material anything, that means the fact, as John referred to, if you look, we looked at Wikipedia the day Biden declared his, president-elect. And the Wikipedia said that it's when not only the votes have been counted, but when all the legal disputes have been resolved. So to the extent that right now, all the legal votes have not been resolved yet, okay, Trump might not say he can win, He might think he won, and he can form that as an opinion, and he has the right to express an opinion that he thinks he won, given the information he has that not everyone has seen, because there is an information asymmetry out there, that maybe he thinks he won, and he might legitimately thinks he's won, but it's a difference between legitimately thinking something and being able to prove it, and he's going through the act of proving it, okay? At this point in time, the only proof Biden had he won is a whole bunch of networks said he won. That's it. So there's still disputes out there, and those disputes are material in nature, and Biden said be patient until everything is resolved. That's what Biden would have said is, it's looking good for me, but let's wait for the legal process to play out. And he's not doing that. And the whole media is piling on to basically try and basically convince everyone that all these lawsuits have merit. Well, if all these lawsuits had no merit, then these states would not be trading at 83 cents on the dollar. They'd be trading like every other state at 99 cents on the dollar. So a market price is saying these lawsuits have some level of merit, okay? They're not saying they're probably gonna win, but they have enough merit to turn a AAA security into a junk bond. So, I mean, that's really where we are right now.
Okay,
that's
an interesting.
So they want to have a premature coronation, and then the question is, this way: if Biden said he was president-elect and they didn't label it, and then Trump is this overturned, the basis is right now, if they didn't label it and they said they were doing misinformation, right now Twitter would not be able to be sued. But if 230 ended, then Trump could go out and say, not only am I president, I'm suing you because you let a false statement go up. So you're liable now for your label on me, and you're liable for your statement in basically portraying news that factually was incorrect. Beyond that, you have to tell you, Wikipedia, we have screenshots. Wikipedia is now changing the definition of when somebody could declare themselves president-elect to justify Biden now justifying himself as president-elect.
Absolutely.
Our CPO found that today.
Yeah. They're
So
rewriting
really,
history. They're rewriting history.
So words matter. And we used to be able to vote. We would vote with our feet. We could vote with, now we vote with our eyes and our clicks. How free are we, Chris?
Well, I wanted to clarify 230 really quick, and then we'll pass it off to Chris. 230 in layman's terms is the platform is not liable to get sued for what other people say on the platform. If they start publishing and changing and curating content, acting like a publication, theoretically they should lose that protection, and then people could sue them for fact checking and doing other things. So in Jeffrey's example, it's clear they're fact checking, and they're fact checking with editorial bias. Therefore, they should be liable per the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas's words, it should be checked out, and we should see if they still qualify under the current law. So the idea is, you're an editor, you can get sued. You're not an editor, you can't get sued. And so that's what 230 is.
Yeah. Thanks,
Question,
Don.
But again, it's separating out the issue from having liability to whether you have the right. There's no doubt that they have the right to curate content. The only difference is what kind of liability as a company they assume, given at what level of curation content no longer makes them subject to the Section 230 benefits.
Yeah.
But it's not censorship.
Jeffrey, just to ask a question.
It's not censorship.
Are you saying that, this is a question for Jeffrey, that curation falls under the protection of 230 or not? Or are you saying a certain type of level of curation is where it needs to fall under it?
No, it's just my opinion, because you have to look what the law is.
Yeah, no. How would you like it?
For me, once you hire a fact checker, okay, you're no longer, to me, a neutral platform. Okay, so once you're judging the content, okay, you're now a publisher because you're judging the content. As John has used the term, editorializing social media. You're editorializing social media the day you appoint judges who are judging content. So they're not there having a team of people saying, what's the most narrow definition of Section 230, so we make sure we're in compliance. What they're saying is, how much can we get away with and still preserve immunity? And so far, the courts have been very protective of them abusing the 230 protection. And even one of the founders of the Section 230, two of them, one was Ron Wyden, I believe, a Democratic congressman, And Reed Hunt, who was at the FCC at the time, they believed that the current practices today, are inconsistent with what the principles were that they thought were embedded in 230. But that's a function of bad courts. Okay,
Yep.
That's not a function of the law. It's a function of bad courts. And Clarence Thomas will hopefully, with his statements, have better judges, opine on this differently, than other courts have done so far. But that's not a function of how the law is written. That's how the law is applied.
Yes.
So,
and
to be
if
clear on this.
If I can cut in, Chris, you made a really good point earlier, which is about how people aren't monetizing content anymore and they're not making money anymore. And it's affecting publications the most. People who actually, for a job, are liable for what they write and write articles and news and distribute it. They're the ones losing the biggest right now. And if you look at it, they're losing revenue left and right. Paywalls are going up, all this stuff, because they're not getting as many clicks anymore. They're not going there anymore, because why read the article when Facebook, Twitter, if they fact check for you, people trust them, therefore they are now the barrier to entry. So you're seeing these platforms taking all the money away from the real journalists, and now the journalists are just sitting there writing whatever Facebook and Twitter want because they want the click revenue, and they won't get the click revenue if they don't write what Twitter and Facebook want. Chris,
Exactly.
to you.
Oh, that's well said. I've seen that happen in 2018, where Facebook came down hard on a lot of different sites.
Mm-hmm.
I drafted something a couple of years ago that I called the Data Manifesto. The problem right now is we don't have a well-defined regime regarding data. The most valuable asset there is data. So we've never, these platforms have, well, companies, they have their rules regarding terms of service that deal with privacy, but never has there been the conveyance of title. Typically, when you sell anything, you have to prove you're the owner of whatever it is you sell, or if you're selling something on behalf of somebody else, you have to have evidence that they've designated you as an agent, and there's an actual agreement that exists in place. So what really I think is where we've been failed by the courts, is the concept of the courts have not been protective of people who've said, I never gave you the ability to sell this. It's like the example I gave once in an interview I had was, when I go to a garage, I give the garage the keys to my car. They have the car. People can walk in. They can look at my car. They have the keys, but they can't take it on a joyride, and they can't sell it. They're a custodian over my property. I never convey title to them. Zuckerberg always used to say the data is yours. He's custodying it, and he's basically, all he's doing with it, is sharing it with people you want to share with it, and you give him a right to take a look inside of it. But, the question is, if I use this analogy, maybe people don't like it, but, one thing is saying is, if he's not selling me, okay, or he's not selling you, he's not selling John. What he is doing for anyone on the platform, he's dissecting all of us, and then he's selling all the attributes of our parts. So it's like if you give somebody a permit to go in, and now you died, and they can go and take, but you're still alive. So you're a living cadaver where he's going out and he's saying, I'm not selling you, but I'm learning everything about you, okay, that defines who you are, and selling that to other people. But you've never conveyed that title to him, okay? And so there is no property rights. We need a property rights regime for data, where that data is, that you really don't have, what I like to say is, it's your property, it needs to be used with your permission, it's gotta be portable, and if not, you don't have personhood. Our personhood is being robbed from us. This is a process of dehumanizing us and stripping us of what's most valuable to us, and it's done without consent. So, and the level to which it's done, we don't even know, because you can never get an audit and discover all the things they're doing, and think about how they become predatory towards people who've never granted their consent. I'm not on Facebook, but you could be on Facebook. You and I have a conversation. They could be going in and then finding out about me, and I've never granted consent. And whatever they're learning through me, through a third, well, think about it this way. Facebook might learn something from me through you, okay? So they learn something about me through you. What if I put an email out to you and says, hi, Chris, I want to let you know this is completely confidential, okay? So if anybody else learns anything about this, you're responsible, okay? So if you have a Facebook account, they're going to take a look at it. They're going to monetize it. If I could one day discover that Facebook went out and said, you know, we took this information about Jeff without your knowledge, okay? But you should have known on Facebook, we're gonna take all the information we can get from you that's possible, okay? And I learned Facebook has it, and then I go to say, and I go to you, and I say, what happened? I gave it you confidential. You're gonna sit back and say, you know, gee, I kept it confidential. I'm not responsible for Facebook. And Facebook goes back and say, sorry, we got Section 230 protection. You can't sue us. So I'm back to suing you because it was your responsibility to have them not have access to it, you know? And so that's the mess of this legal regime of where, you know, people can't preserve their privacy and where they can go into people who've never consented whatsoever to give them any access to any attribute of their life. Yeah. So this is why people independent of politics, people like, you know, former founders like Sean Parker and Steve Wozniak say, get the hell off Facebook. You know, their business model, it's a horrible model.
Yeah.
It's a sociopath.
Jeffrey, that analogy of the parts is quite impactful.
Zuckerberg is a sociopath. The people who are in this business are sociopaths. You know, if they can enjoy going in and dissecting people and dehumanizing people for monetary value, what do you describe that as? What kind of human being does that? Really?
I'm going to hold off my professional opinion on that one, which I could offer at this point, but I'm going to not do that. Chris, do you agree that the big companies have done a bait and switch? And how does Rumble promote the principle of private property? Would you share how people make money on Rumble and how private property is important?
Yeah, well, the big tech companies have done a bait and switch. There's no doubt about it. When YouTube first started in 2005, it was not even close to what it is today. It was a totally open platform, as free as you can possibly imagine, without any kind of restrictions. They didn't even have copyright restrictions at the time. They had lawsuits coming at them from Viacom, Sony, in the billions of dollars because of how open and free it was. So the premise of YouTube was, it was far more open on the copyright side than Rumble will ever be, just because we have to abide by copyrights on Rumble. The other platforms, it's the same thing. It's progressively gotten worse and worse and worse. They've all done the bait and switch. They've all got us onto their platform under one pretense, and they've completely changed over the course of the last 10 to 15 years. When it comes to Rumble, with respect to generating revenue, yeah. So there's the model is quite similar to YouTube in the sense that we do a revenue share on ads with creators, and we pass a lion's share of revenue. So in all cases, Rumble only makes 20% of the revenue on Rumble, where we give 80% either to the distributing partner, to a portion to the distribution partner and a portion to the creator. But yeah, we're kicking back about 80% of all the revenue generated in all videos on Rumble on the platform.
In that sense, it seems to me that Rumble's part of the American dream, and that's still alive.
Yeah, the way I like to see it is that, and I alluded to this earlier, is that, we went through an era of Web 1.0, and then we went to Web 2.0, which is what you're kind of seeing, and then all these tech oligarchs kind of taking control, doing the bait and switch, selling the dream and then changing that dream on everybody. And then I think we're going through another iteration right now, which is Web 3.0. It's kind of a combination of what you're seeing, what Parler's doing, what we're doing, and what Bitcoin represents. It's like giving the power back to the creator, giving power back to the people, putting it in their hands, making sure that they're generating revenue from what they're distributing to their friends and giving them a cut. I believe we're entering that phase right now. It's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be tough. We're going to take punches, but that's the next phase. And it really kind of started with the blockchain and Bitcoin, but I think you're seeing companies based on these types of principles now giving the power back to the creator and to the people on these platforms is what we're all fighting for now.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that your companies are similar in spirit to the ones that excited the world initially when the internet got started, with access to knowledge, expanding capacity for expression. It was all very exciting. So let me jump back over to John before we go to the audience questions, because there are a lot of people want to ask you some interesting things. But where do you see the next trend in social media? Where is this going, John?
Well, I think you're seeing the trend. right now. But really, from what we're trying to do, we've got so much more to tackle. And right now, what we've shown the world is that this is a serious need. This is a serious thing. This is something people should be investing their money in. People like Jeffrey, who we actually didn't provide a significant background, but Jeffrey's been a lifelong investor, hasn't lost yet. He's predicted a lot of things, and he's always won. And so I think you're going to see more people, and as evidenced by probably Chris's and my email box recently, we've got a lot of people wanting to see this space succeed and wanting to put money in this. So this is evidence that this is working. This is evidence that that is the future trend, is in free speech and privacy. And this isn't something that's only on the right. This is something that the left believes in too, not so much the free speech bit right now. They probably benefit heavily from Twitter and Facebook, and that's not to disparage them, but they're benefiting, I think, quite a bit from this. But the privacy aspect is really important for them. And I was just on, a left-leaning publication, and we had a nice 10-minute back and forth talking about this and about privacy. It's a huge thing. So this is something I think both sides can agree on, is that they might not like the free speech as much, but the privacy is a huge thing. And I'm sure they will love free speech one day if the coin was kind of flipped the other way around and they were, on the receiving end of, unfair treatment.
I think that is true. All right. Well, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Erica Amirati. Erica is going to offer some questions. Please understand that there are so many questions pending. We won't be able to get to them all, but Erica is going to do her best to throw some meaningful ones out there. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks to our guest panelists, all very interesting. There's a ton of questions, since we won't get to very many of them, but we'll be jumping around a little bit. One of the questions that really occurred to me, and I think a lot of people in the audience may have it, we as conservatives, yes, we understand we don't want to use Facebook, we don't want to use Amazon, we don't want to use Twitter, we don't want to make heroes out of people and institutions we don't agree with. What can we do? Amazon's so easy. What can I do about Twitter? So maybe 2 minutes to each of you of what are practical replacements we could use for some of these internet or social media platforms. John, how about you?
Sure. I'll be quick. If you take it seriously, what the markets tell you, what a capitalist market tells you is, if you take this seriously, you're going to use your feet and you're going to use your wallet to help prop up competition. Right now, we're seeing that in the free speech sector. In the terms of Amazon, we're going to have to see some competitors come up. Right now, they're the least expensive for a lot of people, most convenient. So in my opinion, Walmart has a great opportunity in that space. They're failing. In my opinion, Walmart is utterly failing because they should be competing with Amazon right now to provide them some competition. And so they're trying a little bit, but not to the extent they should be. So this is kind of how the markets work. So that's kind of my answer. That's how we do it. Feet on the ground and wallets.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I would reiterate exactly what John said. We have to put our money where our mouth is and support businesses that are that stick for the same values and beliefs that you have. With respect to Amazon, John, are you speaking about AWS specifically when you say competition, or are you speaking more on the e-commerce side?
I was speaking about the commerce side. I think most people don't actually realize about AWS, how big that is. And by the way, there's tons of competition for AWS.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So when it comes to like in Amazon, I think Walmart is doing something there, but not to the level they should be. Obviously, it's going to take some time for a lot of companies to emerge. This is a new market that basically, not a new market in the sense, but it's a new market in the sense that people are really wanting something different right now. And they're really looking for real competition out there. Parler and Rumble, Rumble on YouTube, Parler on a Twitter and Facebook side. You're going to start seeing more things emerge, more companies, you got like even Newsmax right now is having a huge surge in terms of consumption for news. So you're going to start seeing these companies emerge. They finally have a chance now, where I think it was very difficult for the last 10 to 15 years having having YouTube being like a go-to, for example, no one wanted to change. They're pre-installed on every single phone. They're embedded in Google's search engine. It's impossible to break the market. It's a monopoly controlled by a monopoly. The only way that happens is like you have, obviously if you had like Donald Trump joining Rumble tomorrow, you're going to have the entire world come on. Well, half the world have to come on and see what he says. So that's a way you can kind of break a monopoly in a sense, but you kind of have to support these companies that like Rumble, like Parler, that are going really fighting for you right now. That's the way I see it. You got to put your wallet right there.
Yeah. And one thing to reiterate on that, Chris, is I heard an analogy by somebody on Parler. They said, it's like you have a girlfriend and she lives in the apartment next door, and she moves to the apartment across the street. Are you going to stop seeing her? You only have to walk across the street. It's not that big of a deal. So it's the same way in social media. You can walk across the street, supporting both sides helps you out. So helps everybody.
I have to break our own patterns. Jeffrey, do you have anything to add there? I think we got a pretty good consensus about what we can do. We just have to take the initiative to do it maybe for the first time. Then after
I think that people have to take the initiative too, and they have to be better at education with respect to the fact that there are alternatives to Google search engine, is DuckDuckGo. So the more people use it, the better it gets. So if people are willing to accept the fact that they want to make a commitment to making an alternative better, they should start using alternatives. You don't stay away from Chrome and go to like the Brave browser or Tor browsers. There are more and more emerging privacy vests. If you go into even some of the smartphones, there's a keyboard out there that's an encrypted keyboard. You can put a keyboard on, I forget the name of it, where you can basically, when you use your phone, you substitute that keyboard for the native keyboard, and then everything you're sending to people is completely encrypted. The key is keeping your data away from people. Once you keep their data away and your information, now things that are value of them, they're gonna have to pay you for. As long as you're willing to give it to them for free, you're giving them the opportunity to make a lot of money off of you. There are more and more people coming out with more and more products. The founder of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, just announced that he has a project out there also regarding data sovereignty. There are a bunch of people in the beginning, unfortunately, with a beginning after Bitcoin, and there was this mania of these all scammy ICO projects. They've been washed out, and now you have kind of more legitimate people, using blockchain projects. And by blockchain, it just means it's a ledger. It's a public ledger where it's designed in such a way where it mitigates information asymmetry, so everybody has access to the same information at the same time, and and there's no doubt about the veracity of that information because of the process it went through in producing that information. So I think we're seeing more and more now what I like to call a trust revolution, and we're moving from a world, hopefully, we're not intermediating trust through supposedly trusted third parties, but we're intermediating trust among and between ourselves, and we're developing protocols that facilitate the transfer of information, so we don't need a trusted third party, so that we can intermediate a trust between ourselves. But we have to, in order to make that work, we have to put the time and commit it into it. If we decide that we like our convenience so much, the more we value convenience, okay, the more complacent we are, the more we're going to surrender our freedom. So the only way to preserve our freedom is that we pay a higher price on freedom than we do on convenience. And if we do, we'll change our behavior, because there are a lot of alternatives out there today. There are alternatives that you can get off Gmail, get off iCloud, even being on the phone, send completely encrypted. There's a project out there that basically can encrypt everything you put on Facebook, so you can post stuff and mask it to Facebook while you're continuing to use the Facebook infrastructure, and yet you're masking everything so they have no access to this stuff. So there are a lot of people working on a lot of these projects on how to protect your data and information. Once you do that, okay, you've demonetized them, okay? They're gonna have to completely change their business model. So that's the way, is to not let them monetize us, but we gotta demonetize them so we can then monetize ourselves. And the best way to do that is to look for projects that will completely preserve your privacy. And when we focus on just privacy preserving projects, okay, these companies die because their business model is no longer viable. Their viability requires our participation and our consent, okay? We really have the power. We just are too complacent, you know, to really take the time and effort that they provide us so much convenience. We've so far accepted the trade-off for the convenience we're getting in return with the power that we're letting them accumulate. So it goes back to at what point do we say, you know, we've had enough, and we're going to vote with our feet, and we're going to choose alternatives because we're going to take the power back. But there are tons of options of people working on projects, and what people should do, and I'm not talking about investing in the projects. That's what I do. I invest in these projects. I invest in the infrastructure. But the average person should just begin doing research on these projects and start adopting them. And once a few adopt them and a few are successful, you know, today, because Chris is successful today and John is because of what's happening to Rumble and what's happening to Parler, there's somebody out there who has never thought about starting a business who says, now I have a great idea, and now I'm convinced that really we can take on Twitter and we can take on Facebook. So maybe this will motivate some entrepreneur who right now never thought they were going to be an entrepreneur, decide to become an entrepreneur, because now the possibility, you know, now they see this as not only a possibility, but maybe a probability. So hopefully, you know, what John and Chris are doing are motivating other people to the one day come out and do something better than we're doing today.
Yep.
That's
why we can't screw up, right? Because they'll do that. And Chris, I had a question for you actually. I was kind of curious. Have you guys been attacked a lot? Has your site been kind of attacked? Has your PR been attacked?
When you say PR, like hit pieces in the media kind of thing?
Or slanderous Wikipedia pages.
We don't have a Wikipedia page. Imagine that. They got taken down like 2 years ago. That might be
kind of
good,
lucky.
My goodness.
So, but in terms of like our infrastructure being attacked, nothing yet. We do pretty large volume because of the enterprise side that we have in our business. So it's might be embedded in there. We don't see it as much. But I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, so yeah, it's like a nice lead in when we talk about other projects and other things that are out there. One of our participants was curious about Gab. Is that in direct competition, or is it a different space, or whoever is the best at, or I don't do any social media, so I can't speak to what it is. Is that familiar to you folks, Gab? Maybe.
I'm not that familiar with it. No,
Okay.
I believe it's a social media site, but I don't think it's the same like Parler or Rumble though.
Okay.
I think they're more, I would argue that they're more competitive with kind of Facebook than Twitter than anything else.
That's what my understanding too.
Okay. Another question was dealing with blocked URLs, or is that a problem, especially for Blogspot URLs? Who's doing the blocking?
Oh, everyone's probably frustrated if they have a Blogspot on Parler right now. We temporarily blocked them because Blogspot has this really weird thing they do where they basically sell their subdomains to people. And so you'll get like these prostitutes, and I'm being literal, like prostitutes will buy blocks of these subdomains, and like they'll buy like 100 of them. So like Candy Girl at Blogspot, Lollipop at Blogspot, and they'll buy all these blocks. And they'll spam them in our comment section trying to get clients. And so we just said, this is out of control. We're getting so many reports. We don't want to hire moderators. We don't want to deal with this. So we said, let's just shut that off for a little bit. And so we shut off Blogspot because they're selling these subdomains to nefarious purposes. And I don't even know if they know about it. We had added a spam filter that's pretty aggressive now that is taking care of that problem. And so now we are actually going to be re-enabling Blogspot. Actually, it should be enabled now already. So whoever's having issues with it, if you're still having issues with it as we're speaking right now, then let me know, like tag me on Parler or something.
Getting back to 230, I know we had a little discussion about it earlier, and certainly big in the news and in these areas. If you remove it, do you give the platforms more power? Or do you hold them to using it and sue them for not using it correctly? And I know that could be a long answer, but to the question, is it more helpful or harmful? understanding that it's, I think Jeffrey did a good job of explaining how when it was created, that's not
we can let Chris kind of. I'm gonna kind of defer to Chris on this one if he wants to answer, because I think I gave my opinion a little bit on it. I know Jeffrey did as well.
Yeah, Section 230 is interesting for Rumble because we have this layer where we do a lot of verification on copyrights of video content for people that want management of their video content. So for us, there's a little bit of an advantage to remove 230, whereas like for Parler, there would probably be less an advantage to remove 230. But generally speaking, what I think needs to happen on Section 230 is there needs to be a clarification for curation. Does that mean you can curate only, Fox News and CNN content at the top of every feed? Is that curation? Is that editorializing content? Or does curation mean fact checking and blocking posts and shadow banning posts? There's all these different levels. And I think the best thing to do is to really describe in Section 230 what companies like Parler and Rumble should be allowed to do. Are they allowed, like what kind of curation is allowed? What kind of blocking is allowed? I think once that's clarified, that will be advantageous both to Parler, to Rumble, and to all the other companies out there. And once it's defined properly, I think that right now, like Jeffrey said, they've pushed the law on Section 230 so far. The language, the way it is today, I think is great. The problem is it's the bad decisions in the court that have allowed to set precedent around it, in my opinion. And that's causing the issues here, where they're pushing and bending the rules on Section 230 and taking advantage of it to their own benefit. But I do believe, going back to it and defining it, or putting a good court case in front of it, will help define it better in the future. Now, I think it should be stricter personally. I don't want a lot of leniency on 230. I even think curating content and sorting it so that only certain authoritative names go to the top is exactly what I've been fighting against. So I absolutely do not want that to be protected with 230. But that's my opinion.
Okay, maybe the last question, then I'll turn it back to Jane to close out the evening. Dealing with cancel culture trends and who gets to decide that, I think we've been all around it. Is there anything special we want to say about, again, cancel culture, hate speech? Who gets to define it? What we can do about it? Maybe a few minutes for each of you. That's you, gentlemen.
I think the Constitution has already defined the First Amendment inalienable rights, and I don't think that the only way to redefine that is through another constitutional amendment. So outside of another constitutional amendment, no one has the right to do it. So the question is whether the Democrats, more likely than the Republicans, will decide that they will begin to define speech and then limit the constraint of the construction of the Constitution by appointing judges that believe that this responsibility associated with speech that limits free speech, and that they will come up with a different construction of the Constitution where they'll basically amend it through judicial fiat, and that's the risk that we have, that it could occur through judicial fiat rather than the appropriate way of amending the Constitution, where somebody proposes a new amendment and says, I want to redefine free speech, and I want to exclude these characteristics, and then I want to move it around the country and pass a new constitutional amendment to do it. That's the right way of doing it. Nobody will do it because nobody will think they'll be successful at it, but that's the right way of doing it, and it's unequivocally the right way of doing it.
Okay, either John or Chris, or if not, then
Same thing as Jeffrey. You explained that well.
Yeah, that's we certainly feel individually for people who are in that position, but it's a long road to hoe. Okay, well, a lot for everyone to think about this evening. Thank you so much. Enjoyed sort of monitoring some of these questions. There's a question that came through. Maybe we were taking this for granted. Who's Erica? I'm Erica. I'm with the Liberty Forum, so I'm with the Keone and the Jane part. I thought that was funny. I said, yeah, I guess you just tuned in for the first time. Well, who is that person in that little Hollywood square up there? That's who I am. So Jane, we'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, pardon me for not introducing you properly, Erica.
Okay.
Jeffrey, John, Chris, what I want to tell you right now is that there were even more people who wanted to be watching this program right now that were unable to get in for a reason that we don't quite understand yet. I hope it's innocent and not sinister, although I'm kind of having my doubts right now because of who you guys are. So I guess when you have good friends, when you have the right friends, you also have the right enemies. So we'll look into that. But in the meantime, if you were in the room in Mountain View, you would have probably several hundred people standing up and applauding your efforts to stand up for free speech right now. And I just want to say thank you very much. And I wish you could hear that applause.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.